Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Vjeko and Waldo.
And Vjeko.
And Vjeko, yeah. Thank you, and welcome to this session in the last content slot of Tech Days 2022. I'm very glad to be able to start this session and to introduce ourselves. This is actually the first time that Waldo has agreed to have me in the first slot, you know, like it was always
And last.
Waldo and Vjeko. So
Yeah, Vjeko.
yes, this is now Vjeko and Waldo.
And Vjeko.
And Vjeko and Waldo. So we are Vjeko and
Are
Waldo.
you happy now?
Yes, I'm totally happy.
Finally.
So again, we are Vjeko and Waldo, and we
Vjeko.
are MVPs, and you probably have either seen us or read a little bit of us, and we have been talking about bad habits already. And that was 6 years ago. We were here in Antwerp, and it was about CAL, because back then we didn't have AL. And even though I'm pretty sure we have handled all of bad habits that we introduced back then, it was 6 years, so we all had a chance to accumulate some more. So that's why we had to do this session.
We did our best, right?
Yeah, we absolutely do. So you know that we usually, when we ask questions in our sessions, we prefer that you clap. So do you know what you need to do? There you go. Perfect.
No, that were multiple claps. One clap. Do you know what you need to do? Right.
That's better. Okay. Good habit. Good habit.
Good habit.
So I have a story to tell. A few years ago, I bought a house, which wasn't finished. And I hired a builder to finish that house for me. And when that guy came, he looked and he said immediately, this house was owned by a builder. And I said, yes, how do you know? And he said, well, it wasn't finished. Builders usually live in unfinished houses. And also, like chefs, they rarely cook extravagant meals at home. They don't have time to spend to cook meals such as this at home. And the same can be said about us. We recognize what best practices are, but we do not necessarily put those best practices into action. So, develop... What?
I recognize this introduction.
Yeah?
I did this introduction literally 6 years ago.
This is good introduction. I mean,
Of course, I did it
But
6 years ago.
But I found it on mibuso. I mean,
Yeah, then it must be
like
good, right?
we are teaching that we need to be repeatable, that we need to reuse stuff.
Yeah, okay, I get that, but I guess
I mean,
old habits die hard. Maybe you should talk about that.
okay, that is true. All habits die hard. So, I have a story to tell.
Oh, another one.
Yes, but this one is not from me. I actually copied it, but from my blog. So, let's talk about this one. There was this experiment. They took 5 monkeys and put them in a cage. And then they put a banana on top of the cage and a ladder with a sensor. So when you touch the ladder, cold water starts spraying. And then when monkeys saw the banana, they started climbing. But when they touched the ladder, there was cold water all over them. And then they stopped. And then they learned after a couple of times that you must not go for the banana because you will get sprayed by cold water. And then they take one monkey out and put a new guy in. What does he do? He sees the banana. What does he do next? He starts climbing for the banana. And what the other 4 do? They beat him down because they know what's going to happen. And then the new guy learns. And then he doesn't go for the banana. And then, you know, one by one, you exchange all 5 monkeys until no one knows anymore why they're doing that. But still, every single time you put the new monkey in, he sees the banana, he starts climbing, and he gets beaten down because that's how they have been doing business there since they can remember. So that's all I have to say on this topic about the folder structure.
I think they got it.
Let's hear the claps.
No, other claps. Numerology. Apparently, we still put quite some meaning in object IDs. So, question. Who thinks table 18 is the customer table? That's what telemetry says. Who thinks table 27 is the item table? Nice. Who thinks table 333 is the item ledger entry? Thanks for proving my point. Do you know the ID of the global trigger management?
49.
Yeah, thanks for proving my point.
It's a good number.
So, yeah, as actually Andre in this session also addressed, we should not be working with IDs as such. In any way, IDs are bad. This, obviously, is bad. Yeah? This is completely ridiculous. And if you understand the joke, you kind of like prove my point. Yeah? Okay. So, numerology has many faces. In a way, we are, and I see a lot of people still, putting object IDs in, for instance, files names, because we remember them, and then we can easily find a file, Ctrl-P, and start with the ID. Or compulsive object ranges, trying to force objects in a certain range, like I reserve 10 IDs because I need everything from the resource module, let's say, in that same ID range. And even to order fields. Yeah, it makes sense to be able to order my fields, because then I can see them. Well, no, it absolutely makes not a single sense. Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong table. So if you, for instance, see this same as a screenshot, that's what I see a lot. And that's what I have been doing a lot as well, because back in the days, old habits, this was the way to sort our fields, right? But they don't make any sense anymore. So I could be just putting the street, in this case, all in the end. And if I would be using that or browsing, like this view here is just showing me the order in the file. The ID does not have any influence there, right? Same for here, just a table BA. BA stands for bad habits, not BAMBA. It's not that. Anyway, thank you, Vjeko, for messing up my keyboard. And this is just an alphabetical order. IDs do not impact anything. So it's pretty much time to abandon the use of actually putting a use in object IDs.
Yeah, so most of us came from CAL world, and we had a lot of good habits. We preached about some of those good habits 6 years ago. And those good habits can easily become bad habits. A lot of people have simply taken the AL language to just be CL, you know, with dark mode snippets, but it's a lot more than that. So let's talk about this. What used to be a good habit is not necessarily still good. Things that we used to do back then because we didn't have a choice, or we didn't have a better choice, we don't need to keep doing because maybe today we have better choices. Like, for example, this one. It's totally ridiculous to do this in the age of Git, but yes, I've still seen people.
Yeah. That's your code.
Yes, it's my code, but I wrote it 6 years ago, like it was future-proof. I knew I would be talking about that.
Yeah, that's true. You copied that. Yeah, and so you were future-proof 6 years ago.
Of course, you see, this is BC TechDays 2022. So don't do this. Like it's pointless. Git does all of that for you. It's just, yeah. Then another one. Do not yell at the compiler.
What?
What?
I didn't catch that. What?
Do you still yell at the compiler?
Of course I yell at
the compiler.
Why not?
Because it's a bad habit, man.
Okay, then.
Come on. I mean, another thing is, I'll stop yelling. It's a bad habit to yell. Well, you need to calm down.
Are you awake now?
Well, if they slept, they surely are not sleeping anymore. Management code units. Like all those, you know, big fat code units that you put all of your code in that you do not know where else to put. Then you have some management code unit. That's a bad habit because it is
Why
lazy
is that
way.
a bad habit?
It's a bad habit.
But it's easy, come on. If I put all my business logic
Yes.
in one code unit,
of course.
I just need to be in one code unit.
You just
I can give it just one number.
Oh.
Give that number a meaning. And I just can put all my business logic there. I can just simply find that.
Stop it, come on. So, yeah, that's a bad habit. Like, we should think of our code. We should structure our code. Object IDs should not be a problem. I know that a lot of people, especially I've heard a lot from partners complaining about customers wanting to have fewer objects because they don't want to pay for extra 100 code units or something like that. I mean, this is, I don't know how to call it, sales-driven architecture or whatever. We should think, we should structure code properly. We should make sure that every object has a meaning. We should conform to the principle of, yeah, well, I'm a little bit losing myself, I'm sorry. We are interrupting each other too much. So, single responsibility principle, and management code units violate all that. So, we should stop doing them. They are not really a good thing. Then another thing is no extensibility. 10 years ago, 6 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, when writing CL code, we all wrote code without having to think how it will be extended, because the only way to extend the code was to just go in there and hack away. And we know that our code needs to have event publishers, and we should invoke those event publishers, but it's not just about that. For example, enums. We create enums, and then we make those enums automatically extensible without really managing that extensibility. So we should either not make enums extensible, or when we do, we should have our code to be able to manage that, to be aware of possibilities where other people will extend it. But not being ready for extensibility is bad, because your code, once it's in BC SAS, it will be extended. Then another one is, we often used to create keys just because people wanted to sort by keys. That's absolutely no longer necessary. And very similar to that, we used to add some index fields because we had flow fields. That's also absolutely necessary. For example, this one, where did you take it from?
This one is actually, I forgot actually, a key on one of the important tables, let's say, I think the item manager entry. But please tell me, what is this useful for? I mean, this isn't key declared by Microsoft, which says I need a key, but I don't need it as a SIFT. But I do declare a SIFT index, but I don't need the SIFT index. And I declare a SQL index, but I don't need the SQL index because I switched it off. So this pretty much 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of code, which I absolutely don't contribute anything. I did put, by the way, a discussion on Twitter, trying to find out, like, does anybody know why this is for? And the only conclusion, 2 conclusions actually. First one, maybe to avoid the code cop warning, like, hey, you need a sub-index field. Yeah, okay. Second was conversion, that it was converted from the old code base. Okay, I can get that. Okay.
I think I take the next one. So, comment and forget. That is also something that I would like to speak, but actually I think I'll come back to that later. Yeah.
Don't forget.
I'll come back to that later. Yeah.
Okay. Good enough doesn't mean good. What do I mean by that? Well, it's not like when a ship is able to float that we are able to use it, to ship it. Yeah. So in a way, yeah, compiling obviously is not good enough. We need to look into more than just does it compile. Yeah, we should. Can our team maintain it? Can it be extended, like Vic also already mentioned? Does it conflict with anything else in my system? Like I might have this new app, but maybe it conflicts with the functionality of another app. Do we want these dependencies? And so on, and so on, and so on. Now, app source comes with its maintenance. We do not have releases anymore. I don't know if you noticed, we have waves now. And waves basically mean, yeah, there is going to be a new number, and we or going to announce a lot in that new number, but that doesn't mean it's going to be released in the new number .0. It might be new number .1. And we kind of like have this wave kind of effect that every single update is like a big release. And then every single update might be breaking changes or what we consider to be breaking changes. Like this happened in my company after the last update, 20.5. All of a sudden, 100 tests fail. Minor update. Yeah, that can have obviously a lot of reasons. Data can be a reason. You might say your test needs to be data agnostic. I know they are not. But yeah, data can be a reason. Obsolescence. I've seen a lot of obsolescence of fields, of procedures, and all of a sudden my code fails just because in 20.5 they obsolete some kind of procedure, or table or procedure. Options to enums, but we all still know it. I think the implicit, explicit with and all that, and what that came into account. Now, how can we prepare for that? And yesterday I had a session and I focused a little bit on code reviews. And that is important. In my opinion, code review, implementing that in your development workflow and everything, in my opinion, this is one of the most important things you can do. This is the only way for me to get some kind of glimpse on what the status or what the quality is of what we deliver to customers and as a product to customers. But I'm not going to take that angle because there is a step before code review, which is simple code cops. There are a lot of code cops that you can comply with as a developer already. So my advice would be that you implement as many code cops as you can find. There are a lot out of the box. You can create them yourself. This is just a screenshot from what I have in the product. Yes, we do have our own code cop. Actually, Vjeko wrote it to comply with licensing. We need to implement a licensing component on every single app. So we have this code cop to foresee that we actually do that. Don't forget that. Yeah? And you can do that yourself as well. If you don't want to comply with certain rules, then don't. Pointless rules do not make sense, and you can do that. You can, again, implement a certain file, code rule set, to prevent that. And what I can also recommend, and I'm glad he's here, is the fact that there is now a linter cop. It's not maybe going to prevent you mistakes, but it's going to make you code clean. And I think that's as important as all the other things I mentioned. Created by what I call the history guy. Do you know the msdin365.code.history? Oh, come on. Don't you know that? Look it up. The one repository I've opened on my laptop every single time, the whole day, just to look up how Microsoft, well, messed it up. How can you use these code cops? So the first step, obviously, is as a developer, you can see what is going on in your own code base, but in CI/CD, you can also check on these cops, right? In your builds, in your validation pipelines, you can check how is your code acting. And it's not just against current. We are talking app source here, so against next minor, against next major makes sense as well. And they might have to fail in current. They don't have to fail in the next minor, but at least you have a glimpse on what will be your problem in the next month. It makes all the sense in the world to do that. And since we're talking about CI/CD a little bit, we might talk also about the D part, about the deployment part. Does anyone know this screen? You know that screen?
Yep.
You shouldn't.
Okay.
This is a very, in my opinion, very unfortunate screen because it makes us, let's say, not automate what we should automate. I actually saw this tweet not too long ago. I'm just going to let you read it. it's very unfortunate because I have no idea if this was a serious tweet or not. I have no idea. But if it was, I mean, it's not. I can upload one app, obviously, with this page. But in many cases, and I hope that I'm not alone in this, it's not just about managing one app in one environment. It's about managing like a gazillion apps in gazillion environments if you're very successful. So deployment is not just about your app. It's probably about managing a lot more than maybe just an app that we created. It's maybe also deploying or having to deploy a complete dependency tree. And I'm going to show that later, in my situation, we have 40 apps that we need to deploy. And if we deploy just a subset, we probably have to deploy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other apps to basically deploy the entire new feature that we created. So it's not, let's try that with that page. I mean, that is not manageable. So, yeah, and on top of that, it's not just maybe Business Central apps, it's maybe also that go along with Swagger deployments because of your custom API that needs to be updated on some kind of server that manages that Swagger, or Azure Functions and so on. Now, automated deployment can be done both on SaaS and on-prem. Who of you have still customers on-prem? Of course. I hope Microsoft heard that. I mean, on-prem is not gone. And we are doing AL on-prem, and we should also automate the deployment on-prem. Makes all the sense in the world. I have been blogging about that. There is a way to do that, an easy way to do that. Please do that. It's a free tool, so it is possible. A deployment should not be more and not less than, for instance, in this case, a simple approval. Pressing that button, the blue one, basically should just deploy, again, not one app, but your solution. Yeah? And I want to briefly show that, not show a deployment, but show just a pipeline. So this is just an example of a pipeline where we would have a complete build. It builds me my apps, whatever that is. But this deployment is pretty much an approval. Gilles, in this case, Gilles Dond, he is a consultant. He doesn't know anything about the technical sides of Business Central, but he knows a lot, and he does really good project management, and he knows when we can deploy certain functionalities. And that's pretty much what he did. And in the background, it might look something like this. Just an example, publish, you see publish, 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 3 publish steps. First one is publishing the dependencies. Second one is publishing the per tenant extension, because this is a customer deployment. Third one, don't you have everything yet? No. Third one is all the apps that are dependent from my per tenant extension. And you can just get that all in one go to the customer. But you can only do that if you automate.
So, good. I forgot, do we have sound?
That's a good question. I have no idea.
Do we have sound? I mean, okay, good. I need sound from PC3, so yeah. Forgot, like, there's usually this checklist before we start, but yeah. This was obviously a non-prepared session, so. Let's talk about this one. I like to call it VSCAAN. You know what that acronym stands for? It's easy. Visual Studio Code as a notepad. So, and I will tell another story, visually this time. Yeah, the last one.
Copy that one as well?
Yeah, from YouTube. So, there is a video from my country, so I've put the subtitles. And there is no sound, but there are subtitles. Yeah, there is no sound. It's okay.
Too late.
It's okay. Too late. Too late. Too late. Too late. Te laat.
I think they get the point.
Yeah, I think you got the point. So, yeah.
And by the way, this is a Croatian movie, right? These are Croatians.
Don't buy an unfinished house in Croatia. Okay. So, do you use snippets? Good for you. So, you should be using snippets. Sorry?
Do you use snippets?
I absolutely
or do you
do.
also
no,
just
no.
disable them like David does?
Of course, David knows it how to do it because I showed him. So how do we, like, why snippets? I know that there are people. Let me hear who does not use snippets.
AJ.
AJ, come on, you need to clap here. Yeah. So, I mean, for example, there is a very nice one, like I want to create a code unit by Waldo, so I just say this one, and then, of course, I just assign an object I need for Ninja, and like my method is awesome, and it's do awesome, and yeah, in essence, this method already does everything it needs to do. Yeah, or like in my, with my previous customer, I had like a large number of code units had this exact same shape, so we had something like this. So we essentially just assign some stop talking action, and then just describe, and then version, and then just put the code in. And then, in essence, snippets save tremendous amount of time. And whoever says that they don't use snippets and has strong reasons, I would ask to reconsider those reasons. Snippets are easy to do. You can do snippets per project. Like, for example, here I have this snippet, and I have that snippet, which I'm just going to show in a short while. Snippets are really easy, and they do save time. So please use snippets. Yeah, I've just said all that. The next one is keyboard shortcuts. I remember the old days when it was, you know, developers took pride into how well they could use the keyboard. So let me give you an example of what is possible in AL. A lot of you probably know, but we can really take the keyboarding to the next level with VS Code. So here I will first use a snippet because I have prepared it. So it's, yeah, kind of, you could say that this demo is, yeah, faked, but it is not. I've actually done something like that last week. That's why it reminded myself to actually show that demo. So let's imagine I have these 8 variables that I need to pass into this code unit as parameters. So they come from outside, I need to assign them in. I mean, this is a typical task. So here I have this method or function which I need to call with them. And okay, I will just paste them here. Then I will do like this, make 8 cursors. Then, in essence, simply go here, delete this last one. Sorry, I don't need to delete that. I just need to do this, and then put them all in the same line, format them. Then I'm going to select all 8 of them, then copy them, put into this, come here, paste them once, and then just once again do this. In and done. So all of that, I mean, I'm done for something that would normally take me maybe 5 minutes, maybe more, or I don't know, maybe not 5 minutes, but you can be very efficient with this. And what I want to recommend is that if you do not know all those shortcuts, there is this editor playground in Visual Studio Code. Go there and play. It will teach you these and a lot more so that you can really be efficient with those. Then what I would like to talk about is settings management. We very often do not commit settings.json into repositories, but that is bad. We should be doing that. The reason why we do not do that is because there could be some settings which are, let's say, my user settings, but user settings belong to user settings. We have 3 levels of settings. We have user settings and workspace settings and folder settings. And user settings are for what I want to personalize for myself. And other things should be per workspace or per folder. And we should absolutely be enforcing settings for every developer in the group. So, for example, if there are extensions that we want to suggest, we can put that into the repo. If there are some settings like code analyzers, should we enable them, like format on save, for example, or some specific settings like for Object ID Ninja or for CRS, Waldo CRS extension, you want to put them and make sure that everybody uses the same settings. So this is something that you should take advantage from. And all settings that do not have anything to do with how the folder or the workspace should behave, that simply doesn't belong to settings.json. And that's easy. Then, another one, extensions. Do you use extensions? Okay, that wasn't enough claps, but I'm pretty sure you all do. Let me show you. Let me prove it to you. So there are some pretty good extensions out there. Like, for example, Waldo's extension, or Andrzej's extension, or David's extension, or my extension. Yeah, and there are a lot more other very useful extensions, like this one, also very good. Totally recommend to use it. So there you go.
So, are you using extensions? Yeah, okay.
So what do you others do? Okay, yeah. Not much about it. And yeah, of course, comment and forget. I really think I can come back to that later.
Let's come back to that later.
Okay, yeah.
So, tables extensions as a design pattern. I addressed it yesterday in my session as well, very shortly, and I would like to address it here as well, and unfortunately as a bad habit. And I know that a few people are going to hate me now, because I do know that quite a few partners implement this as a good habit. And why would that be a good habit? Well, simply because table extensions, well, they cost performance. Yeah? Whenever you create a table extension, you basically add a new table on top of another table, and if you request some data out of it, it's going to have to join and all that, and that costs time. Now, what I mean with table extensions as a design pattern, let me try to implement that a little bit with this, some graphics, let's say. We have 4 apps. Now, 4 apps, obviously, these are not one in one big app. No, we have a decent, let's say, multi-application architecture, right, Camille? Yeah. So, and that's what we try to implement here as well. And sometimes these apps use one or more library apps because it makes sense that we have these, let's say, building stones that we can use in multiple apps at the same time. This, as such, is pretty good architecture. But then there is a problem, because whenever we need, if we have to extend this, let's say, sales header and sales line in every single extension, and if we, for instance, have to do that not in 4 but in 40 apps, well, then we have a lot of table extensions, obviously, and that would mean that, that we want to mitigate that. So, what I then see as a solution at some partners, well, that is, let's put all these table extensions into a separate app, depend from that app, from the right apps, let's say, and then we only have just one join instead of possible 40 joins. Performance-wise, very good, because we gain performance. Architecturally, well, questionable, I guess. Questionable in the sense of it's actually just a shortcut. We are solving a problem with the wrong solution. A huge interdependency between all apps. As such, at some point, it's unavoidable. Maybe now everything is still nicely split in the apps, but at some point, in some apps, you will use fields that are not meant to be used in that app. It's unavoidable. It will happen at some point. If it's not this year, then it's next year or the year after. Yeah? It's complex. You see too much. And architecturally, it doesn't make any sense. So, I showed you this yesterday. It's a graphics, and we'll try to explain a little bit for the people that haven't seen it. This is actually a performance test. You see here table 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 4, not 5. And a test where I either test with partial load or without partial records. And you'll see here that indeed the higher stacks, they indeed indicate that there is a performance problem when we add table extensions, if we do not take this into account while coding. Because when we set these set load fields, how do you say that? Consistently, then we might keep the performance consistent as well. And that's what you see here with all the stacks, the lower stacks, that are pretty much all the same. Yeah. So the worst case here was table 4, and it had 8 table extensions. Yeah, I just wanted to share this, that there is architecturally a solution, maybe, yeah, that table extension, or maybe there's a coding solution, and that is consistently implement set load fields. Yeah. What I find quite interesting here, which I cannot explain, so I'm going to confuse you completely. This last two here, the table for find set with partial records, that's this one. So that means I actually just did set load fields on one field and there is no join. But this one is with the just-in-time loading. So I used a field that I didn't use in the set load fields. And that actually is faster and consistently faster, which I cannot explain, than just a complete join. So what happens on SQL Server is two statements, one partial, one with a complete join, which is apparently faster than once the complete join. Yeah, and this is consistent. So maybe some SQL caching, maybe some NST caching, maybe a combination of both of them, maybe something else. I have no idea. Maybe you have. Please tell me. Sorry? Single join, there it is. I have no idea what that means. But, sorry, I really don't. But I'll continue. It's almost the same as, and I mean this table extension, right? It's almost the same as developing monoliths. Maybe monoliths is the next bad habit that we might or can talk about. Well, if you do not know what a monolith is, well, yeah, this is a monolith, but that's not what I mean. It's pretty much like the code customized base app, or a base app, not code customize, a base app, many functionalities in one extension, which you might have been able to split into multiple extensions. Now, it's maybe easier on short term because you don't have to think about it. You don't have to worry about, I have this piece of functionality that I need to develop, where do I put it? In the pile, the management code unit. So it's generally conceived as being a lazy architecture, but you cannot be lazy for this architecture because it does bring quite some problems, because it's hard to read, it takes a long time to compile, your build pipelines are a mess. I mean, on the long term, this is not a good practice. In a way, we need to embrace dependencies. But that's the next slide, apparently. Yes, this is a view on the base app. It has now close to more than 7,000 objects, 16,000 publishers. Yeah, it's quite a lot. In any case, we should be embracing dependencies. And this is something in this new world from AL, which is actually not that new anymore, that we need to get used to. It's, if we really embrace dependencies, it's really easy to split into multiple teams. Like Vjeko is, for instance, now building an building an extension, and he completely doesn't know what the 41 else other extensions have to do, but he is able to build it because it's an isolated environment and it needs to be working isolated as well. It's easier to understand, maintain, extend, debug, document, replace. Well, in my opinion, there are only good things that can happen with a good dependent workflow, although you need to manage that, obviously, because even in a dependency architecture, chaos can happen. Yeah? You really need to manage that. I only make dependencies when it really makes sense. And I would like to recommend that, again, DevOps. We come back to DevOps quite a lot, apparently, but DevOps can help, right? And I would never recommend to use any kind of automatic dependency resolver. What do I mean with that? If you would have like one big repository with 55 apps, it's going to be a problem like, okay, what do I need to compile first? An automatic dependency resolver can pretty much, let's say, loop all your app JSONs, find out what the dependencies are, make up the order itself, and then start to compile every single app in the right order. And that's actually exists already, I think, in the Container Helper as well. But in a way, especially in DevOps, that's maybe not the best way to go, because when that build would fail, that means that you have an extra dependency that you need to take into account. I would always do a manual dependency, like a hard-coded dependency in pipelines, so that if I would add, or a developer would add a dependency, that my pipeline fails. And the only thing that I need to do is worry about it. But that's exactly what I want to do, because I want to manage my dependencies, and not just automatic stuff. So to use an automatic dependency deployer, what I mentioned before, the deployment part, well, you do not want to worry in which order you need to upload the apps. That's, in the deployment process, something that needs to be automated. So in a way, if we get this ISS back in picture, this is a modular system. It's pretty easy to replace a module, add a module, and all that. But I can tell you, this modular system, you can also mess up. I don't think NASA or anyone would want to replace anything here or maintain this modular system, right? And that's kind of like the picture where I would like to get to. This picture might be spaghetti in your eyes. Is it spaghetti in your eyes? This is actually our product, I'm afraid. Do I have that? Yeah, I have that still open. So, yeah, I'm not joking. This is the actual 40 apps plus all the test apps that we have. And the statement here obviously is, yes, this is still manageable. Sorry, I'm a little bit fumbling here. Can I just use this? No. Can I undo this? No. Yeah, anyway. The spaghetti that you just saw, what you should see is the limited amount of levels from bottom to top. When it is wide, that just means there is a lot of functionalities that work next to each other, right? When it would be high, then you have lots of levels of dependency. And that's where, yeah, well, problems could arise, let's say. It is absolutely something that we need to manage, and this is just an example in the pipeline, and it might not tell you too much. But what this tells is actually, this is Vjekoslav, by the way, and he only has one dependency, which is on our licensing app. And in the pipeline, we define that dependency, not just in the app.json, sure, also in the app.json, but also in the pipeline. And if tomorrow Vjeko says like, but I need a dependency on REST app, it's not going to be in the pipeline, so it's not going to work. And Vjekoslav will have to ask permission to add that dependency, and there is,
Am I
let's
the
say,
only bad example you have?
that is maybe a bad example, yeah. Okay. One of the sessions that I missed here is the multi-application architecture. This is the first one that I will see on Mibuso TV. And yes, there is mibuso.tv, and you can access this on this YouTube channel, and you will see everything here. Mindless stuff, so it's pretty much time for you, since it's about mindless.
And should I come back to that stuff? Nah, I'll talk about mindless coding
later.
So, what is mindless coding? Well, it's when we write code without thinking too much about what we are doing. And when talking about mindless coding, let's start with this one. So, application area all. Yeah, so, well, it's not that useless. At least Microsoft has shown us, like, we will be able to not have to write code like this anymore, but we will be able to simply do this, which is amazing, and
So
I like
solved.
it. Sorry?
Problem solved.
Problem
right?
solved. Yes, but that's not the problem. That's not why application area is contender #1 for the most useless feature ever. This is the fact that we just put all. We always put all. And this will not solve the problem. This will actually just automate it. So we will not have to write it at all. And it's actually a very good feature. So who here always uses all?
Oh, that's too much.
Yeah. Well, okay, so
too.
I want to invert the question. Let me see who consistently thinks of all the possible application areas and then puts them in action. Okay, well, that was embarrassing, but yeah. And that is the problem. Application area is an amazingly useful feature. It has a purpose. And what have we learned from Microsoft? Just put all. And now we will be able to automate that. Well, at least what we will do is we will save a lot of space in our repositories, because I'm pretty sure 85% of all AL code out there is application area equals all. So now we will get rid of that. So what should you do? You should think of application areas. Like, for example, here we have application area location. So if there is something that has to do with location, we can put a field that has to do with that application area. It's out of the view for those users who do not work with locations. And you can do it with a lot of things. A very, very useful feature. So let's not mindlessly just put all, because that doesn't help too much. Okay, another one. Another most useless language feature ever is tooltips. And again, tooltips are not useless. We make it useless. So I can bet that, like, again, 95% of all tooltips out there are either exactly equal to caption or contain text like specifies and then caption. Yeah, so this is not really the best way to use that language feature. There is this very useful tool by Andrzej Zwierkowski in his AZAL DevTools, where you could assign tooltips to all, well, wherever they need to be assigned. It is smart because it will also look into page where you have maybe defined good tooltips so that you do not get specifies caption, but get something really, really good out of it. We show this or, no, I think.
Do you want me to show that? Yeah, I do.
Okay, well, show it then.
So, you might already have seen, I think that Andre showed this feature himself in this session. But what I particularly like, now this is obviously a bad example. We are in a bad habit, so it's a good habit to use bad examples in a bad habit session. But in any case, I have a new field here, location to 2. And the idea is that I also add an existing field that's already somewhere in another page. Now, if I would use Andre's tooltips, you see that although that captions are pretty much the same, the tooltip is completely different. So for this one, since I'm reusing the location code, right, on another page is going to reuse the tooltip as well. Now, here the first, you see here that by default it will use the field name. If you would have a caption like this, and you would use Andre's function again, it's beautifully going to take that caption. But again, the thing that we should do is obviously make this in a more useful description that it is out of the box. Yeah, that's the idea. But I love this feature that we can at least reuse tooltips.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, tooltips really, really good feature. Please use it correctly. So it doesn't need to contend in that contest. The next one, to validate or not to validate, that is the question, or not.
That was a question on Twitter, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a question on Twitter, actually. So there was this discussion. I don't really know who started it, but it went for a long time. And then we discussed, or people discussed, about should we validate code or should we not validate code? And there were some very valid points on there. And then I said, okay, well, this definitely sounds like a good topic for Waldo's and my session. And then Waldo said, yes, of course, always validate. So we talked about it.
So, next.
Yeah, next, stop. Well, it's not that simple.
Oh.
No. But it's not complicated either. So let's think of this. Like a junior developer writes a piece of code like this, and it will not take a rocket scientist to figure out that this is not going to fly. So there is circle of validation, so we get an endless loop, and yeah, so the developer fixes this. So this loop is a problem, so he does this.
Oh, good field.
Checks the current field number. Amazing, right? No. Because what is there is so many problems about this, but what is the biggest one? Cur field number will just give 0 if you're not calling this from the page. So it will not solve the problem. It will, again, put the problem somewhere else. So validations are not easy. I want to make a point here. I'm definitely not going to tell you, do not validate. And I'm not going to tell you always just validate. What I want to tell you is I want to talk a little bit about pure functions. If you're familiar with functional development, which is what AL kind of, at least from far, seems closer to than object-oriented development. In functional development, there is a lot of talk about pure functions. What are pure functions? Those are functions that, when called, they only operate on their lexical context. They do not do anything outside of their lexical context. In other words, they do not have side effects. And what are side effects? These are side effects. I call a function, but that function does something else somewhere else, like modifies the global state, leaves something in the database, etc. And now, in AL, anything that involves events, or essentially all triggers, all record validates, all of these have side effects. So they are impure functions. Please, do not consider that impure functions are bad or evil or anything. That's just how they are called, because of how they handle global state or resources outside of their lexical context. That's the only thing that's impure about them. They're not bad. But in AL, we have a lot of them. And my other point is that whenever you are invoking an impure function, you need to be aware about that impurity. You need to know what exactly is happening there. And then developers who just write mindless validate code, they will essentially face problems. And why is this especially a big problem in our world today? So let me first say, we are now living in SaaS world where your extension can be deployed together with other extensions. We could say that we could reasonably make sure that our extensions, when we write them and we want to deploy them at customers on-prem, we can control all code flow. We know which other extensions we interact with, so we can inspect and we can check and make sure that all code flies nicely, that there are no problems around any of the impurities and essentially any of the side effects. However, in SaaS, you cannot guarantee anything like that. And there is a lot of mindlessness around. So routinely not invoking record validate is mindless because, you know, even if there is no validation code on a field, somebody can attach a validation code to that field and you do not know. Also, mindlessly just validating everything can be a problem. And especially writing code that's not ready for these scenarios is especially mindless. So my point here that I wanted to make, and why I really wanted to discuss this here, is that we should always write code that will be ready for validations, for triggers, for all of that code executing. So if we have anything similar to those circular validations, we need to structure it properly that under no circumstances, in no scenario, we will suffer from any bad consequences or problems with that code. So even though I still stand by what we wrote on Twitter, that you should validate, my point is we should also be sure that we write good validation code, not bad validation code. Because in the past, we could afford not to really write good validation code because it was easy to control. It's not that easy anymore. Okay, so
before we go into that, so you pretty much agree with me, correct?
Yeah, I do.
Just validate.
Yeah, validate.
So why this 10-minute lecture?
Just said.
Okay, yes.
Like,
anyway, what actually I was pointed to by someone this morning, actually Jeremy, this morning, and I needed to show this because I didn't know and I love it, is that you can add validations of fields quite easily. So just imagine I have just 2 lines, but this could be 25 lines. And if I would like to add validation to it, there is this extension from David to move this into validate. So just to assume that validations are obviously implemented correctly. I love it. Had you anything else to add?
Well, I think you can take over, yeah.
Okay. That one topic that you wanted to do? Not
No,
yet?
I will come back to it later.
There is no low code, it's just someone else's code. Nobody? No? Okay. So when we look into this power fluff, like I like to address it to, which is obviously a joke. I love power suites and stuff.
PowerShell?
I love PowerShell, absolutely.
I think you finally put PowerShell where it belongs, like low-code stuff.
in your case, it's no code, right?
Oh, that's true.
No, obviously PowerShell doesn't belong in this list. And we're talking Power Apps, Power BI, Power Automate, all these things, all good. The only thing that I would like to address is be mindful. Because it is not because you can that you should. And it's also not because you should that you can. But that is something completely different, apparently. What you need to think about is this power automation. And we can apparently, and I'm going to watch Michael Megel's session definitely as well, because I missed that one too. My main concern always have been ALM, lifecycle management. Am I able to deploy my Power whatever with my Business Central app? And what if Microsoft decides in BC SaaS to upload or to upgrade my Business Central app? What happens with my Power app? It is still going to work. How am I going to test that? So there is much more than, is this going to work tomorrow when I've finished my low-code Power app? Is it going to work next week? Is it going to work next month? Am I going to be able to make this part of my product? And if so, how do I deploy that to the customers of my product? And these kind of things. There is much more than just being able to do something quickly. Jeremy, he is the master in metaphors. He actually, a few days ago, he said to me, like, low code has the ratatouille problem. I was like, okay, who is ratatouille? Yes, absolutely, everyone can cook and should cook, but knowing how to make a good meal doesn't mean you know how to run a restaurant with proper health and hygiene standards. It's a nail on the head, I think. All right, next. Not minding permission sets. If I show you this picture, do you know what I mean? Yeah. Who of you, and obviously we don't, because we are developers, we do not implement, right? But at your company, is it a general custom to set everyone just super? That's too much. That's actually embarrassing. But I must say, in our company, it's pretty much the same. There is a lot that we push like to the, let's say, outside of the project, and we'll take care of that when we have time. Let's do the implementation first. And then you start to like put everything at the end. That was something you need to talk about at the end, right? Yeah. But the worst command, in my opinion, and apparently I'm a little bit isolated in that opinion. But
I share your opinion. Yeah.
Okay, we are isolated in that opinion. So the worst command was this one. Generate permission set containing current, I don't even know how it is completely, current extension objects. Why?
Saves time.
What?
Saves time.
Saves
time.
And now we have two worst commands. We have one for XML and AL. I never got that. But as a joke, I actually applied that to one of our apps.
And what do you think, like how much time I would need to write all that? So, time saved.
But how is this different than a super permission set?
I don't care. Like, my problem solved. It compiles. ALCOP doesn't mind.
So I don't get it, really. From the moment, and I don't get it. I cannot say I don't get it in like 10 ways. So I don't get it. So we need to give ability for the users to properly assign permissions. So we need to think about permission set. And what I would basically always do, and we try to do in our company, is to first of all create permission sets for every module. I'm not saying app, but module within an app. And then at least have a read-only and an admin. At least. And maybe you can have more. That's the minimum. And you cannot generate that. you need to consciously code that. Consciously code that. Yeah, no testability. We did something special. I'm going to ask you a question, and if you look on your left or your right between the seats, and you look, you will see no mic because it's invisible. Under your seat, there is a sensor, and that sensors your hand gestures. In our glasses, there is vision and AI and stuff. Meaning, if you answer this question with a clap, we will exactly know how many people will have said yes. Who of you thinks testability is a good habit? Let me see. Just crunching the numbers. I think that's a good one. I think we all agree we need to do testability. Maybe a follow-up question. Who of you don't? Everybody.
That's what the graph says.
Yeah, that's what the graph says. Everybody applies good habits. So I'm just going to skip all these slides. No, maybe a little bit on how to do testability. We all know we need to do testability. Luc has done a session today, which I'm also going to watch because I also missed that because we pretty much were also rehearsing this one. But about unit testing and all that. So just a very simple thing. I would like to just share what we do in our company as what I think might be a feasible approach. Now, we try to distinguish unit tests with integration tests very simply by we have one app, and one app has its tests. So you see there one repository with an app and a test app, and you basically just deploy all of them together, so you always have a test with your changes that you do. Each change gets another test. That is usually the case. But if you start integrating these apps, if you start to use one app with another app, things might conflict, or simply not work, or simply just act differently. This is funny, I get that, but the same exact thing can happen in software, right? So we just don't have to just, let's say, test the unit, test our app, maybe test only the method in the app. We also need to do the, let's say, when they're all installed, right? So just a suggestion, create a separate app. And the only thing the app does is be dependent from all other apps. That even is not necessary, but your pipeline should install all of the apps that make sense to you to work together, obviously. And then just run all your tests. That is step number one. I can tell you, a lot of them will fail. Not because of the previous slide, maybe because of the simple things like in app A you have this message on after post, in app B you don't, but you do not expect that message, but still you're running the post, so app B will fail because app A shows the message. And just showing a message doesn't mean there is something broken. It just means that your test needs to be changed. Yeah? So in this app you would be able to, sorry, I need to go to the next slide. You would be able to facilitate a mechanism, and this is just some code how we did this, a mechanism that you check that every test has been run, and if failed, it might be disabled. That's actually the first two lines, disable test. So in code, we can disable a test and replace the test with a copied test to the test app. Meaning, from this app B, where the test was failing, we could copy that code to the test app. We replace it with our new app, a new test procedure, and we obviously implement that handler, message handler, or whatever that we would have needed to finish the test. That is in case that the test actually succeeded. All the or failed in case of that, shouldn't have failed. But obviously, all the other failures you will catch as well, in this case. Yeah. Okay, recommendation obviously is build testability into the core of your development. Do not accept a single pull request without a test. There is no reason to accept a pull request without a test. No, whatsoever. Every bug should be able to replicate it in a test. And if you replicate it in a test, you solve it, and you have an extra test, and you will never have that bug again. Not a single pull request should be without a test. Not a single one. Vjeko.
I totally agree. So can I finally talk about this?
Well, not yet.
Or I think I'll come back to this later, really. Yeah. But let me talk about something else. If it's hard in AL, well, then it probably doesn't belong in AL in the first place. So how do we know what belongs in AL and what does not belong in AL? Well, this belongs in AL, and this does not. So a little bit about things that do not belong in AL and things that do belong in AL. Anything that you can write in a language which is more efficient, and especially if it has no side effects, like, for example, doesn't need any data from Business Central, doesn't need to write anything back into Business Central, like stuff like complex calculations, like any kinds of scientific algorithms. Like, I can give you an example that I've been faced with recently. This customer has needed some very complex calculation about how to cut metal bars in the most efficient way to completely eliminate scrap if possible, or at least minimize it. And like a solution was, of course, go back to AL and hack it away, or find something. And we have found a university in Germany that has built some, it was expensive as well, but was pretty fast and amazingly accurate. And yes, it was difficult to integrate, but it was much better to integrate with that than to simply write it in AL. A lot of things we often just do in AL because that's how we do things. We write AL, but it's not necessarily the best way. Another indicator that something does not belong in AL is that it performs better somewhere else. Like, if you can get like 2, 3, 5 times the performance and it is critical, well, then you should leverage it. Anything that already has an HTTP API or that is easy to wrap into HTTP API should be considered, because it's so easy these days to just go and write an HTTPI call from AL. Like, if you're in doubt, like you have something complex to work with, well, put it into an Azure function, then just call it from AL. It would be far better in the long run, and your customer will be far more satisfied. And especially if you didn't have to reinvent the wheel, because trust me, if we went with calculating that, you know, those metal bars, we would probably just reinvent a very bad wheel. Whereas, you know, those scientists at that university, they have solved it in the best possible way. Another thing that is blazingly obvious about not belonging to AL is anything that's not cloud ready. I mean, we are in 2022. Yes, we do build stuff for our customers on-prem, but like a lot of people still use .NET Interop. But let me ask you, your .NET Interop, what is it? It's just code that you wrote in .NET so that you can interoperate with it. So why not put that .NET code into an Azure function and then interoperate with it using HTTP rather than .NET? Much better. So .NET interoperability obviously does not belong there. I think we didn't say it last time, but we did say in one of our sessions, don't net. So don't net. Or also any on-prem stuff. Like, you should really already have started phasing that out. It is possible. It is, of course, you have on-prem customers, but it's so much better to have to write code to build things which are SaaS ready. You will be happy when you have that. And then finally, it's not that much about not belonging in AL, because it's obviously entirely AL, but forking base app so that you could customize the bejesus out of it. So, nah, you should definitely not be doing that. Yeah, I think That's it.
Yeah?
You can
Are you
take over.
sure?
Yeah. I have short talks today.
Apparently. Do I interrupt you too much?
Yeah.
Many bad ways of code deprecation. Well, is there a good way to deprecate code? Basically, I guess that's not a question. I guess no, there isn't. But we do. Can I switch maybe?
Yeah, please do. Yeah. So I can watch YouTube.
Code is being deprecated, and we need to deprecate our code sometimes as well. The typical examples obviously are, and which are the ones that we love least, is anything that has to do with schema, right? If we would delete a field, remove a table, remove, function has nothing to do with schema, but also has some deprecation going on there. What do? As such, we can obsolete the object and go through a default upgrade process. Or, other option, we can just delete the code and use the force. I'm not sure how you think about the dark side of the force, but you have been, or we have been asking for it as partners, and we got our way. So Microsoft built this force into the page that we love so much, and we are able now to force our changes up until even live environments. And I would say, maybe not the best way to implement that as being let's say, a habit. And since this is a bad habit session, it makes maybe sense to talk about that. So dangers, well, unexpected code removals, obviously, unexpected data loss, broken dependencies, runtime errors. I have seen situations where, we pushed this through with a force, obviously, but now I need my data back. Yeah, backup, restore, whatever. So recommendations, what I would do. Now, I do know software lives. Sometimes you need to refactor, and I strongly recommend to refactor. Makes all the sense in the world, but that usually also means that you need to take away stuff. And that Microsoft hasn't made that too easy anymore. So, in general, please never use the force. Use the upgrade path as much as you can. And I think it is possible to upgrade your way to your refactored application. What I also know is that your deprecated stuff will be there until end of times if you do not act on it. If you want to act on it, then act on it not every single time you refactor a small piece of code, but maybe in one bulk of an action that you just, let's say, manually once in a year, make time for removing all these obsoleted fields and obsoleted tables. And then you can just do that in one go, focus on that in one go. You can basically just prepare yourself, make sure there is a snapshot, there is a backup, whatever, but just that there is just one, let's say, transaction or process that you can do to clean up. It's important to clean up, but if you would automate bad practice, which is the force and using the force, well, then you're going to automate the possibility that you might do something wrong. And that's the thing that I would like to avoid. I will never automate such a step. Now, some people know I'm also involved in ALOps. We basically give tools to automate stuff through DevOps, and there has been asked a lot, like, would you please foresee an option to automatically force my app? I have a personal problem with that, to create a product that automates bad practice. Okay, so please don't use the force. There we go. There's another thing as well that I would like to address. There's also, let's say, a clean way to refactor functions. This has been done by Microsoft actually quite a lot, and I just want to address that a little bit. This awesome piece of business logic is obviously a hard-coded amount of sleep. Now, I need more sleep, or at least I need to be able to decide how much I sleep. So refactoring this is not just replacing that function. No, I should actually obsolete the function, and there is still overloading. So you can have like a process and have both functions enabled. Let your compiler make sure that either it's obsoleted or not obsolete, and take care of the upgrade process that way. It's just an example on how you could handle, in this case, function deprecation. That was it. That was the end of our session.
Actually, no, wait. I need to come back to that thing.
Oh yeah, almost forgot.
What was that I wanted to talk about?
I have no idea, that's your point.
I know that I should have solved it then.
Let's just stop then.
What was that? Ah, I remember. Yeah, so one day I'm writing and a piece of code is bugging me. So I cannot advance, I just keep stopping on that. And then I say, okay, I'll comment this out so I can move on, and I'll fix this. I'll make sure that it works later. And then Waldo calls and says, oh, I have this big problem, can you please check? And then I do, and then another, and then a week later I have this in my repo, and I have no clue why I commented this out. So was it causing problems? Was this unfinished work that needs finishing? Was this refactoring in progress? Or was it, I mean, did I mean to delete it? Have you ever been in this situation? No? Okay.
Only with you.
Only with me, yeah. Well, don't work with me, now you know. So, it happens. And it is a bad habit, like commenting pieces of code. And I've seen a lot of commented sections out there in repositories. When doing code reviews, there are, you know, hundreds, thousands of lines of comments in there. And that does not belong. And I'm not talking about those comments which start with, you know, start and end with some requirement identifier that you know that, okay, this was probably commented out back in the old days, but not yet refactored. It's simply that just commented blocks of code. Please do not do that. That is very bad. Because if it should have been deleted, then delete it. If it shouldn't have, then keep it open. If it needs refactoring, then refactor it or put a to-do. Or, for example, screenshot is actually very small, but it's exact same chunk of code, just with the conditional directive. Actually, here I would like to give credit to the group who attended my pre-conference workshop. Is anybody here? Please clap. Okay, you are here. So thank you very much. We have built an amazing component. Sorry.
Both of them.
Yes, both of them. I'm pretty sure there's some shy people in here. Well, in any case, we have built a component that can help you with this. So preconditional directives, for example, they are much, much better at this than commenting. Why is that? Well, consider this. You see a block of code which is commented out, and it can have been commented out for a million of reasons, and you have no clue. But a conditional directive which says like if and then something, that something will tell you so much more about why was it commented out or what was the intention of this. And even if you want to come back to it later, it will still be far better. I mean, there are other ways, like you could probably like write some kind of a cop which rejects blocks of code which are commented out like larger than, you know, 2 lines or 5 lines, but I wouldn't even do that. Like commented code does not belong there. If Git can tell us what happened with the history, we don't need to retain the history in there. If something is useless, throw it out. If it's useful, don't comment it out. It's that simple. So I think that with that, we can really conclude the session and take the questions. So thank you. Oh, thank you.
No, you'll kill people with that.
Okay. Oh.
Before you leave, we do have this...
Some goodies.
Goodie stuff again first
But
wins.
we don't have shirts to give. That's strange.
Yeah, we do have.
We do.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Okay. Questions? You give shirts, I'll throw.
Yep. I will not kill anybody with this. Trust me.
Yeah. Whoopa.
But let me hear the question first.
When you said that we should validate, automatically validate, create pipelines that validate against against next versions. So, but what about your, let's say, your own extensions? Basically, if you have a few extensions, some of them have newer different versioning strategies. So, if some of your own extensions have newer versions and older versions, and your other extension has dependencies on them, so you also should validate newer and later.
And why do you think we would have multiple versions of an extension?
Well, it's not, let's say, if you have kind of like, say, library app, and it maybe have, let's say,
Okay.
it changes more time than, for example, certain apps, so it has different versions, and library can, let's say, have a lot newer version,
Yeah.
and dependency can be on.
Yeah. Good question.
Do
but
I give the shirt?
yeah, of course.
Okay. So Waldo says so. Yep. Good luck.
If I understand it correctly, the question is rather than you have all these different apps, how do you make sure that they all work together, right? And if I would, I mean, I always test and build them together, right? So if I would run the next measure, that's going to be the next measure of all my latest versions at that same time. And that's how I pretty much try to keep them aligned, let's say. So, as you said, this library app, they probably is not going to be changed too much, right? So it wouldn't have that bigger version. In our case, it does. So all of these apps, they get newer version anyway. So they're all now on 20 dot whatever version, all of them. And 30 of them might not have been changed for months. So if that answers the question. Makes
All and build everyone.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yes. Okay. Well, do you want to throw it?
Make it good.
Yeah, I try. Yesterday you were showing the table extension with 8 extensions to a table, and you were showing the performance, and if you use the set load field, you could solve the problem. Yeah, but if you're extending a table from the base app, then the set load fields has to be implemented all over the Microsoft standard code, and it isn't. So your
Microsoft
recommendation
has a job to
about
do.
the large table extension app that you wouldn't recommend, but would you consider when you have 40 apps, if you have 7 of those apps that are extending
We actually are in a situation where we have 9 extensions
Yeah.
on the sales header app.
Yeah, but then all the functions in all the code units of Microsoft code doesn't use set load fields.
It is what it is.
So it is
what
bad
can I do?
performance, and you can't prevent it. But you
No,
can
but that is a good
reduce it.
question. Absolutely. The only thing that I can say there is ask Microsoft and
To put in set load fields.
and we can create pull requests next month. I've heard. Yeah, absolutely. Something to think about. But what can I say? I cannot put code, and I should not put code in the base app. I should not. That should never be a reason to do a customized base app. No. Either. But yeah.
I mean,
But I do know that Microsoft is more and more mindful on these performance cases, and there are actually have been talks about on how we can, let's say, I don't know how to say it in English, but how we can, let's say, measure all of these different cases and what is the best approach then. I would say, Microsoft has a job to do. They need to implement all these set load fields, but I'm not sure. Maybe that can have a negative impact as well on other cases and other extensions and all that. So I can imagine that Microsoft does that you have these just-in-time loads all over the place. And that is something that we don't or might not want either. Although, like I just showed as well, these just-in-time loads, doesn't seem to be that bad.
No, it's
Unexplainable yet. So, but yeah, maybe that can be an approach at some point as well. No. Did you give?
No, I didn't. I was waiting for you to approve. So.
Yeah,
Yeah,
now
that was
you
the
throw.
question over
Now
there.
you throw. Now you
I throw. So let
Yeah.
me go.
Yeah.
I can aim.
Be
Yeah,
careful.
that was first. Sorry.
Oh, well,
yeah,
he wants
but-
a T-shirt.
Well,
you
he
deal
was,
with
so who gets the T-shirt? Let's vote. Okay. Well, they said you. So
Hi. So obviously .NET, right?
.NET,
But,
yes.
Do you think WebAssembly has a future or potential future in Business Central development?
the question is, if I understood correctly, that WebAssembly, does that have a future in Business Central? Well, that is not the same thing as .NET because it runs completely in the front end. Now, I would say I have been embedding WebAssemblies in JavaScript controllers in the front end. And that's something that does absolutely not qualify here. So we are not violating anything. I can say that even though I cannot give you like blanket warranty on this, but it's something that will not change. Microsoft will keep maintaining web client for, I mean, probably as long as there is Business Central. And I don't think that they will do active steps to prevent you from using WebAssemblies because there is absolute no reason for that. So that is a good approach, I would say. If you have something that can be stuffed into WebAssembly that runs in the front end and takes advantage of the computing power of the front end, which is also substantial these days, but completely underused, then it's a good practice. So by all means, keep doing that. But if we're talking about backend .NET, that's not good. I mean, that's just not sustainable. And yeah, by all means, WebAssemblies are okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and now if the question was also about will Microsoft do something about them, I don't know. Maybe they put something in them. I don't see it coming, but yes, maybe. Because they're very specialized in general, what they do. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Whoop, okay. Now there, yeah. Okay, I cannot really walk that much.
Hello. Yeah. So we speak about code control, GitHub, and we also spoke about management code unit, not to have code units big. Then why do we use obsolete functions? We can just...
I think it's a question for both of us a little bit, but about obsolete functions. It's simply that you will, I mean, I will not say never, but in most situations you do not compile your extension against only one possible runtime. You compile it against multiple possible runtimes. And then when you obsolete your function, you're making sure that, especially if you do it in the way that Waldo has shown, then you're making sure that it can always be properly called. But for example, what obsolete tells you, when you call obsolete, the compiler will tell you. And then you know, okay, I shouldn't be doing this. Or this is something that is being taken out, or, I mean, it is a good way to message to all of other people who are using your code that you are doing something about that. Or maybe if you want to chip in with something else, but I believe that if you are isolated, then it's fine. Like, you do not need to obsolete it for yourself. You are obsoleting it for others who are using your code or who may be using your code. That is the reason why
Makes
you obsolete rather than just delete.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Okay, over there.
So a slightly less technical question. I like tests, and I think everybody here likes tests, but how can we convince management that they should like tests?
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to help you with that because in my company, I am part of management, so that was easy. I was basically, if you want to do if you want me to do my job, we're going to need tests. As simple as that. But I have heard that before. Like you, as a developer, you need to be able to sell your work to your own company, right? And yeah, that's. I have no. Make yourself management.
So yeah, we should
buy
become
stocks.
management.
I mean, it's absolutely a stupid answer that I'm going to give. But if you estimate tests in your estimates and include them with your customer proposals, then there shouldn't be a big problem. I know competitors might not do that, so they will seem like half the price of you, but you know, it will definitely end up costing more in the long run. I don't know, it's a stupid answer, as I said, but it's difficult. Yeah. I'm not a manager, I'm not a part of management, don't want to be, so I don't know how I would do that. Like, I don't speak that language in which you need to convince somebody that a part of work is simply necessary. So how do you convince a builder that you need a foundation? I mean, yeah, it costs so much money to build a foundation. Let's save a little bit on that. Yeah. Can you say it into the microphone?
I think it's the same like asking your manager if he will buy a computer for you to make the development. Yeah.
Yeah.
Best is don't ask if you don't really need to ask, because it's on you to do your job as good as possible, and that's part of it. And as Vjekoslav told that if you estimate that or include that into the estimate, then it's okay. The answer could be, but it was half before, and now you are giving me double times for everything. But yeah, these times are changing, and yeah, everything is more and more expensive.
Okay, anything else? Okay, oh, now this is a challenge.
Oh no,
Like, spread out.
Yep,
Okay,
that didn't work.
almost. Nobody died.
So, Waldo, you said you have 40 apps, right?
41 actually.
41. How do you keep an overhead over all those apps? Like all the ID ranges?
He does not.
I actually do. Vjeko doesn't want to hear this, but we do have a separate app, let's say an Excel sheet, where we have like, well, 5,000 objects, an object range of 5,000, and I just assign a certain range to a certain app. And if we do not have enough, the next range goes to the same app, and you have like a split range. So we have a few apps with a split range.
Okay.
If that answers that question for the object IDs.
And then licensing, and do you have apps that are installed on multiple different customers? Something like that?
We always install all apps at all customers at this point. But we have a licensing app, as you have seen. That was the low-level app. All apps depend from the licensing app, and we enable functionalities in the app. And enabling, we had a discussion this week, by the way, on how we do that. It's very simple. We just make our own pages uneditable if it's not licensed. So business logic is all still in sync, let's say, but the page is just uneditable.
So it's Tesla business model, you know. You put all the hardware in the car, but then you need to pay subscription to activate it. So.
Yeah. Okay. And we all love Tesla, right? Is that an answer to the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just throw it back.
You next.
Yes, next.
Well,
yeah. That was it.
If that was it, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, no, sorry. No.